Hello, everyone. This is Bethany Meadows, your host of Time to Thrive. Today's guest is Pamela Slim. She is an acclaimed author, business coach, and entrepreneur known for her expertise in helping small business owners and entrepreneurs create sustainable growth strategies. She is the author of Escape from Cubicle Nation and the Widest Net, which both focus on transitioning from corporate jobs to entrepreneurship and building communities around business ideas. With a strong emphasis on inclusion, Pamela is passionate about empowering underrepresented groups through her coaching and the program she runs at her Main Street Learning Lab in Mesa, Arizona. Welcome to the show, Pam.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, like always, we have our random questions. So we need you to pick a number 1 to 5.
How about 5?
Learn a little something about you. Okay, number 5 is, would you travel to space if possible?
No, I would not. I love to travel, but for some weird reason, I have no desire whatsoever to be in space. I just don't. I love the Earth. I don't know. I don't need to do, I don't need to climb Everest, or I don't need to go to space.
I'm afraid of heights, and I feel like if I'm up in space floating, that would feel like being high, right?
There are the risk factors. We might say it's more dangerous to drive down the freeway at rush hour, which is probably true, but it's also, I have kids that I love, so I want to be around. I don't need to be lost in space somewhere.
But then about motorcycles. You've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs over the years. What key characteristics would you say are essential for long-term business success? We're always trying to figure that out as entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
About myself that are really important to develop that will help me be successful. What do you that be?
My point of view is it's not about necessarily inherent characteristics of what you're born with, an aptitude for math or charm and personality, because a lot of that we can't necessarily change. The entrepreneurs come from every single background you could imagine, and personality type and all of that. It's more about behaviors that you are willing to commit to. So there's always the choice about things that you need to do in business to make sure that you have a business that is successful over the long run. So they can be specific things like taking the time to really look at the big picture of making sure that you have the right market fit, that you are bringing to the world an idea that actually has viability, that people besides your immediate family members want to spend their money on, and it really meets a need in the market in a way that is valuable. Sometimes I think we just get so excited about our idea that we totally forget about the market fit. And I've seen through the years, many people floundering of just trying to push this idea out there. And it's painful sometimes to be asking the obvious questions as a business coach, but does anybody want this? Do they need it? Did they ask for it? So that's one, is being willing to both do the work strategically, but then also actually hear the feedback, both directly from clients and customers and from other folks. And sometimes folks are wrong. There could be a bunch of people that tell you your idea is terrible. We've all heard those amazing transformational stories of being rejected and then ending up hitting the jackpot. But that is one really important piece. I think the other piece is what I call tiny marketing action. So it's committing to the habit of slowly building relationships, seeding opportunities on an ongoing basis. So the way people do that can look very different, but it is a habit to be showing up and to be visible, to be maintaining connections with people. And then I think there's another behavior, which is really about service and committing to getting the job done. And this may be a way unfair, broad generalization, but I find sometimes that folks who have grown up in corporate, which, as you heard from my first book, Escape from Cubicle Nation, definitely work with a lot of people who were in corporate. And many people, for a variety of reasons, weren't happy there. One of the good things sometimes we learn in corporate is like sometimes you just got to do stuff that you don't want to do, and you get used to just doing it. What's funny sometimes is when people leave and they're like, oh, I'm so tired of working for the man and having it be so hard. They forget the piece that even when you're independent, you still have to show up and you have to deliver services for your clients. You have to make sure you manage the process, that you deal with conflict, that you resolve problems, because people are paying you their hard-earned money. And yes, you want the lifestyle for yourself, but it's not just about your lifestyle. You also have to really be delivering the service. And again, I know it sounds so obvious, but I've seen it all. I've seen folks who are just all about their own boundaries. And in the meantime, they have really unsatisfied clients. So you just can't be in business with that.
It's funny that you said that about the corporate because I was thinking about that. I don't know what prompted me to think about it earlier today, even was thinking about my corporate journey and what I learned from it. And I think the number one thing is processes and systems. I think books we took away from that because a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we're the vision people, right? We're the dreamers, and processes and systems can be a weak area. So I think for me, that was something that really helped me especially as creative. We're even worse. We're up like we want to create and all the things. And so the critical thinking aspect of it is not necessarily as strong, but that's what it did for me. It created balance so that I can run a business successfully. I can do bookkeeping. I can do some of these other things. They may hurt my head, but I can do them anyway. Like you say, sometimes you just got to do what things you don't want to do. But yeah, great points. In your book, The Widest Net, you talk about the importance of community. And I love that. My last book was The Juggle is Real. And I have a whole chapter on building a tribe, which is the same idea when I started my business as a mompreneur, I was homeschooling 5 kids and I was single and I was running a business. Well, I didn't feel like I had time to network and socialize. But honestly, that would have been a game changer for me if I had that kind of community speaking into me, investing in me. So can you talk to that a little bit about the importance of community and how that can really drive your success as a business?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of mythology in entrepreneurship where people will tell the stories about founders and make it seem like they single-handedly brought a product or a service to market. That is very rarely the case. And just for a little sociological moment, very often when we see successful male entrepreneurs, there is almost always, if not one, but an amazing team of women who are behind, who are just working like anything to make it happen. So I've noticed that as a pattern. And just to be bringing something to market, you do need to have people around you, and also to be walking the journey of entrepreneurship, then you often really need to have other peers and partners. So in the Widest Net, like you said, my whole philosophy about building a business that way is where we're really centering our ideal clients in the middle of an ecosystem that they already participate in, where they're looking to other people, events, products, things like that to be solving the problem that you also are helping them solve. And so I like to think about it like a Justice League or the Avengers, depending on if you're Marvel or DC, where you have this group of amazing professionals that you're all united in that effort to help your client. So you can have referral partners that I call peanut butter and jelly partners, that you might refer with a good trust and confidence your clients to. The added benefit to that, in addition to serving your clients, is it also can be great support for you. So you can go through a rough day and you can talk to one of your partners and they can cheer you up and encourage you to keep going. Or you could be short a month where you need some work and you can lean in and say, hey, I know you're really busy. I can pick up a couple of projects if you need help. And that kind of thing, like you were saying, it makes you feel so much more emotionally supported. But I actually think it's really the way that we should be designing our business is anyway, to not only think about our own service delivery.
Yeah, that I hadn't really thought about it that way, but that's a really great point. You've spoken quite a bit about aligning passion with purpose, and that's a buzzword in entrepreneurship, right? Sometimes, and I think you alluded to it a little bit earlier, as sometimes we follow that passion right into bankruptcy because we haven't really aligned it well with financial responsibility or understanding the market and some other things. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. One of the things I said in the Escape from Cubicle Nation days is hating your job intensely is not a business plan. So that's one route, is we're only thinking about what we don't want to do, which does not actually drive true focus and direction in the business. And the other thing is not every passion or interest has to be monetized. And so there are things that we can enjoy personally with hobbies or interests that don't necessarily have to be a business. So a business, you want to be aligning, I think, choosing things that you do feel a deep connection to. I call it your roots in my second book, Body of Work. is really about what are the different roots that you have, purpose, meaning, change that you want to make in the world, where I think you do want to have an energy and an interest in what you're doing. Can you just do something to make money? For sure. Is it easier to do when you care about your customers, when you get excited about what you're building? I think it is. So for me, that's that focused passion where you care about solving the problems that your company solves for your clients. And then you are aligning that with making sure that you also are building a business that people actually want. And so that's, I think, where the passion and the purpose go of both you individually thinking about the purpose that you have for doing your work that really is your thought leadership. And then there's the passion you have, which you need in order to be facing the myriad of challenges that one faces when you're trying to actually grow and sustain a business.
Through your work at the Main Street Learning Lab, you've supported a lot of underserved business owners, entrepreneurs. What are some ways that if somebody's listening right now that are underrepresented communities, what can they do to help break through some of the barriers? I know when I was like coming up in corporate world, I was in the insurance industry, which was primarily male. And I really had to work really hard to overcome some of that biases and I was young. And I actually got told one time that I needed to, I wasn't allowing someone to do something that they wanted to do. They were a client from outside and what they wanted wasn't good for the company. And he actually said to me, you need to just put away your womanly thing and do this for me. No. But so I don't understand to the full extent with a lot of communities what they have to go through, but I relate to it in that sense where I just have to fight for everything. What are some ways to break through those barriers?
Yeah, one term that I've taken to use, it's by a woman named Nobe from Nobe Works, and she wrote a HBR article. I'll make sure that I send it to you and it's linked. It's actually under-recognized as opposed to underrepresented, because underrepresented in some ways can put the onus on community to get more visibility. Whereas I think the analysis for me of where the issue lies, which is definitely what we found at the lab, is in just not recognizing the talent and leadership that already exists and highlighting that leadership. So I have a very strong theory of change about a lot of the dynamics of that, as you said, can be influenced sometimes by systems and that really do systemically keep people in situations that are difficult to come out of. And so a very specific approach that we took to the lab, which actually we closed the lab June of this year. We were there for 8 years and it was a very specific kind of project with a start and finish. So it was an amazing experience, but it was time to close given that a lot of the folks we were working with were opening their own spaces, which was always the ultimate goal. So in the theory of change of looking at working with other community, and especially for me as a white woman, is the main focus is highlighting that leadership that exists. What we chose to do was provide space for leaders to be doing whatever kinds of things they were doing. I didn't lead any programs during the 8 years that we were there. It was always providing space for people to be doing their own events. We would boost that. We would highlight that leadership and really follow the kind of work that people wanted to get done. Because one of the main assumptions that I would get when people would wander in and ask me about the space is they would always go, oh, what are the programs that you're doing basically to teach these entrepreneurs about how to be leaders or entrepreneurs? And I was like, that's not what the issue is. The issue is often people need space, just need support, but they already have a lot of leadership. And so that was a huge differentiator that allowed us to just connect with thousands of Indigenous, Black, Asian, Latinx entrepreneurs and develop really powerful relationships. What I did specifically then, I called myself the unofficial busybody of downtown, is I would have access to a lot more things just with my identity as a white woman. And so I would find out all the things that were happening. What are the projects? What are the events? And then make those connections so that those opportunities could happen. And it made such a huge difference. And I really encourage folks who are thinking about doing work. It is so good when we want to get in and resolve problems But just think about the fact that if you're coming in being outside of a community, whatever that is, you're a man who's totally committed to supporting women or whatever the different community is, you really need to spend a lot of time. I call it listen first, really just getting to know folks and then listen and have them define what the problem, challenge, or aspiration is and have them define what does support look like? What would be the most kind of support for you to give? As opposed to stepping in and assuming what it is that people want, that can get into a lot of weird savior behaviors that are just not helpful for anyone.
Your book, Escape from Cubicle Nation. I love that title, by the way.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. When you go into a corporation and there's like sea of cubicles everywhere. That book's really been pivotal for people transitioning from corporate careers to entrepreneurship. That's the Bible. What mindset plays into this, right? And there has to be a shift. When you go from working for the man, as you put it, to yourself, you have to shift a lot of things. So yeah, a little bit about that. What the biggest mindset shifts on. That was a little tongue work, but
one of the surprising things for a lot of folks that I worked with back in the day is when you were just used to being in an environment where you have your goals given to you, you show up, there's all this activity happening, you got to show up to meetings, you have emails coming in your inbox. There's a lot of reactivity. And depending on what job you're doing, not every job. And I'm not anti-corporate. I loved my corporate job. So I was not one of those people who hated corporations at all. I've said that since the beginning of time when I was writing my blog and my book. But it is a kind of environment where you don't feel that same kind of autonomy and control often in the work that you're doing. So when you go on your own, all of a sudden you realize it is up to you to be setting the strategy, to be getting your work habits and your patterns. A lot of people just feel weird and lost, knowing what to do, when, and how. Some people, depending on how long they were in corporate and how much support they had, just realize like what other people were doing for them in the day-to-day world when all of a sudden they have to do every single part of setting up their business in the beginning. So I think that's really a big change. And the other thing, I called it thawing out your soul, is what happens. Like when you think about it, if you've ever been in the snow and you begin to get the beginnings of frostbite where your fingers are really cold, when they thaw out, it's actually painful. And the same thing happens for some people, especially if they're in a really toxic situation. You have to basically hold your tongue and sometimes just live through things that you know are totally absurd. You can be sitting around a table in a meeting where you just think the direction that things are going make no sense and you're completely disagree. And yet in order to survive in that environment, you have to be appropriate and smile and not, throw a stapler across the table. And doing that over a long period of time has an impact in your emotional health and in your connection with your feelings. So some people, they do not expect that to happen. It's like as soon as you leave the environment, you think that things are immediately going to be different. And that often is where people begin to experience this thawing out pain, where they have to get in touch with their feelings, know what they feel, get comfortable expressing it, always contextually and appropriately, depending on if you're running a biker bar or something. That's awesome. You can swear and throw drinks around and stuff. But in the most part, if you have professional service business like a lot of my clients have, you still need to be doing things that are in accordance with supporting your clients. But that's one part I think that really makes a difference. The other probably hugest category that I wrote a whole chapter on is just talking about it with your family. Like it changes every dynamic that you have in your family. And pre-COVID, like where not everybody was working remotely so much, that could be a big difference. Where all of a sudden, like you're working from home where you haven't been, and there can be the expectation if you have a partner that all of a sudden you're responsible for doing all this stuff at home when you're still working full time, things like that. So there's a bunch of stuff that happens.
I find it interesting. In the corporate mindset is to climb the ladder, play the game, play it well, get the next promotion, get the next raise. That's your focus if you have any ambition at all, right? It's about the title, the side of the office. That's what you focus on. When you work for yourself, all those things don't matter anymore at all. That's really about the next client, the next building revenue, so you don't starve to death. It becomes a whole different approach when you wake up every morning. Yeah. So I think it's interesting that you've written a book about it. I just think it's interesting. I don't think about it too often. It's safe to say the world has gone a little cuckoo, and it's changing faster than ever. Like just AI and all the things. Just I think it raises a lot of fear and uncertainty with business owners. How do you help them navigate that?
That is it's the biggest catchphrase in the world. I remember saying it in the early 90s. So there's uncertainty. Everything is changing. And what we're finding, as you said, is just huge indicators, social indicators, political indicators, our social contract, the way we talk to each other, climate change and events that are happening, or it just feels like everything is at wars. Things are happening on an accelerated pace and also seemingly all at once where things are happening. So I think more than ever, it is reason for us to be grounded in why we're doing our work and looking at the capabilities that we have for being those like steady people in the storm. I think about it a lot historically, those moments where you're like reflecting on the meaning of life, looking out the window of a train or something of like, why was I born at this particular moment in this part of history? And there's definitely a role that I like to think of playing in my family's life, my kids' life, in my immediate community and friends. But there's also a role I think we can choose to play that where you have more agency to be doing it when you do work for yourself, where you really say, what is that role I want to play? And what do I want to build in order to maybe resolve some of these issues, some of these places where we've gotten? It does feel, I'm 58. And so it definitely feels like more extreme than anything that I've seen. And I've seen a lot and lived different places and all that, but it just definitely feels like there are dynamics here that just confound me on a daily basis. It just is, just feel weird that we're talking to each other a certain way and certain things are acceptable. I don't understand it. It's more reason why I am very passionate. I call my clients architects of liberatory change. Like I'm so passionate looking at what they're building, whether it be more equitable structures for people to operate or helping people to make sure they have good methods for communicating with each other or making sure that people have access to resources. These are things we need to be doing and playing in the long game. And I feel really strongly that that's the opportunity we have when we do have this connection and relationship and with each other is it can be hard and overwhelming, but as probably every listener, if you're just going, you're trying to gauge like which direction is the wind shifting. So let me like message my business with whatever direction seems to be it. You're going to lose because first of all, it changes so quickly. And I don't mean just politics, more and more, that's part of it. But it's also, you have to really have a sense about your own rudder when playing the long game. I laugh sometimes that I feel like I didn't set out to do it, but I predicted the future in a way. I wrote Escape from Cubicle Nation in 2009, which 2021 is where we had the great resignation. And so many of the messages there, I was looking ahead and seeing that. I wrote a body of work in 2014 before the early inklings of really like that surge in the creator economy, talking about content. And then the Widest net, more and more now I'm seeing people say, oh, it's not just about content or transactions. We have to be looking, in ecosystems. So it's a blessing and a curse sometimes, like seeing things before they come. But it is part of the commitment, I think, in our work is we look at it and say, in addition to making a living, which is very honorable and important, what is the purpose of my work beyond that? And can I be contributing to a more stable, more generous, more abundant, more kind future? And I think we have the ability to do that as entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Even in the last couple of months, things have changed a lot. And I'm always looking to do an audit on technology for what we use inside the agency because it's a big ticket item for us. From social media management, project management, you name it, all the things. It adds up to a lot. So I'm always auditing it to make sure that we're still using the tools that we should be using. And is there a different tool that maybe combines some of these where we can save a little bit of money and have better productivity? Look at the last couple of months. Things are just flying out the door like crazy. So it's really hard to even just do the research to figure out what is the best tool that I should be using. And we've ended up adding more just from the AI standpoint where we just have video software editing that can do reels super fast and add captions and we just use that tool just for that. And then how do you help business owners figure that out? What the best the use of technology with a bit as to create productivity and efficiency, because that's really the name of the game, especially when you're starting out a new business. You don't have a lot of money, so you got to you got to do more with less. So, yeah, how do you help people with that?
Uh, Some of that has shifted, frankly. One of the patterns I've noticed with just about every client I'm working with right now is what I call going back to the studs. A lot of people are getting rid of a whole bunch of unused subscription and SaaS products and trying to really get back to the essentials. I always think about Chris Lee, who's one of my dear friends, who's a technology web developer and marketer. When I'd always say, "Oh man, what's the perfect CRM that's going to make my life perfect and have leads magically give me money?" And he's like, "The one that you're using." And so he was always that good reminder that on one hand, we often are on the hunt for the perfect tool that we will never find, and more for the infrastructure component, right? For your CRM or accounting software or something like that. So there's committing to use a tool to its full capabilities for an extended period of time for some of the core infrastructure tools. In the world of AI, I'm with you. My team on the agency side is so excited because it's amazing. Every day there seem to be new tools, and it is to your business advantage to be taking advantage of some of the things, like you said, where you can be doing a job much faster and more efficiently. And so even though it's exciting, it's in development, it still needs to be you still need to make choices around tools that you use in the context of some kind of a cadence with business planning, because it can cause a whole bunch of disruption that ends up displacing people from the path of doing work. So I like to look on a quarterly basis and do an assessment and analysis. Definitely is the time of this recording, we're in the fourth quarter. So I tend to look back. I've been on just a slash and burn. It's been great. I've been everything from renegotiating my cable bill at home to cutting out unnecessary things. I just switched email platforms. And the idea is to have the probably best services, but maybe not all the extra features, but really dial on the things that you really need. And then on a quarterly basis, as there are new tools that come in, to be open to using them. We usually go through a testing for different things with, like, maybe different team members might test things out and be like, "Hey, this is great. Let's maybe start to bring it into our next project." But one can get, and by one, I mean me and everybody that I work with, can get totally distracted and excited where you end up really wasting a lot of business operation time just implementing new tools or switching around.
Yeah, the ability of your team to adopt a tool is number one, because I can think it's great because I can use it and I think it's got all the things and the bells and whistles and the things that benefit me as a business owner. But then I introduce it to them and they're like, we don't want to use it. It's too hard to figure out. It's not intuitive, whatever. Yeah. So I think what you said about testing, that's a great, because usually a lot of these things you get a free trial. So use the free trial to see if it makes sense.
That's right. But most tools, to really do that full implementation, it requires a lot of effort and energy. I shifted to Notion, which I use really as like the backbone of my business now for like client portals and knowledge management and all of that. And it's been really great to be committed to a tool for the long run. We've developed different sections of it at a time. And I really am beginning to notice just how powerful it is to not be using 12 different tools to be doing things, to have kind of a central source. But it's time and investment to be building it out fully.
Yeah. Technology is great when it works. Let's talk about storytelling. I love telling a good story and I love brand stories and incorporating that into my clients as part of their overall. Let's talk about brand storytelling a little bit.
I think about storytelling in the bigger context, always getting to the heart of what is that core problem, challenge, or aspiration that you are helping your client to achieve? Or how are you solving the problem? Because all content, all stories are surrounding that particular thing that they want to do. It's like the main focus, the main characters, the main content you're sharing is just all the kind of things that they need in order to be solving a problem. And within that, I remember back in the Escape from Cubicle Nation days when I started as a blogger, back when we read blogs, and in 2005. And so I had 4 different content categories when I thought of what does somebody need in order to successfully transition from a full-time corporate to a full-time entrepreneur. They needed housey twosies, right? How to write your about page, how to get a website, how to get an LLC. They needed inspiration. They wanted to know there were other people like them that had successfully made the transition and not crashed. They needed community. If they were working as an employee, they needed to find places where other people were also on the entrepreneur path. And then in that case, they also needed promotion because they were newer in business, so they needed to get more visibility. So I had those 4 pillars. They would have different stories that would be springing from that. So like I had a series on the inspiration side called Side Hustle and Flow that were like the same 10 questions that I would ask. I would feature entrepreneurs who talked about their journey that they made from corporate to entrepreneurship. And it was a way to have a focused story that's always weaving back to how does this relate to helping that client solve their problem? Some of the how-to could be featuring somebody, getting inspired by somebody else. And then I think a lot of the storytelling in community is ways, whether it be live events, which I've done a lot through the years, running retreats, or maybe somebody else would have a conference and I'd have a whole meetup of folks at that conference. That is more specific storytelling, usually about the community itself. So my favorite thing is to be highlighting stories and examples about how amazing community members are, as opposed to sometimes what we're wont to do, which is say how amazing we are. And that is just boring. It's not there's it's not story. So those are some of the macro things that I think about. And then on the micro level, this is like my growth area, because in all this mini content and just the TikTok world, reels where you need to be making a point really quickly, I was just looking at a video by my friend Marsha Shankour. I think Shankour is a way to say it, where she was like, you're doing a 30-second video, like you have to immediately get to the point. Don't set the context, immediately bring people in, share some kind of emotion. So there's more specifics, even if you're doing something like a how-to. It's like everybody raging on the internet when you look up a recipe and then you have to read the whole dang story about whose grandmother's apple tree the original apples came from to make the apple pie. And you're like, give me the recipe. And then maybe I'm going to be more excited about hearing the story of your grandma. So just the way you structure it, the way you don't vary the lead is what I admire in people who are really good at doing that kind of short content.
Right? The hook. Get the hook out there.
That's right.
A question that I ask a lot of our guests is about common mistakes that business owners make, because I think we can learn from the mistakes of others. And it's beneficial to learn from the mistakes of others before we make them ourselves. So what are some common mistakes that you see entrepreneurs making, and how can we avoid those?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. So many in so many different areas. I mean, let's see, probably the biggest categories, I think one of them is just on the financial side, not keeping your eye on the big picture. There's just getting things together so you're really aware of your own personal financial situation. It is common with no shame or judgment. Like when I can ask certain people, what's your number? Like, what do you really need to make on a monthly basis? If they've just been having direct deposit paycheck and all the money goes to all the stuff in online banking, they may not even really be aware about what actual money that they need to make. So there's a lot of like mystery that a lot of folks just tend to want to solve by just bringing in more money. I'm a big fan of Profit First, Mike Michalowicz's book, which like helps you to be not doing that, where you have a bunch of money and you're like, I'm rich. And then you spend it all and you're like, I'm not rich. And as opposed to making sure that when money comes in, it goes to all the appropriate categories like taxes and operating expenses and all of that. So that's one piece, being disconnected with your money, not keeping careful track. and not preparing for cash flow disruption. Cash flow is the lifeblood. It is hard to manage, whether you're B2C or B2B. So that's one big one. I think the other one is in the all or nothing kind of marketing, which is why I'm a big fan of Tiny Marketing Actions, the methodology that I created, because we're like, oh my God, I have no clients. And then you jump in and you do everything possible. And then you get a bunch of work and you totally ignore marketing until all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I have no clients. And the seeds that you're planting today could be sprouting in February or March. So if you're not doing activities now, sometimes you don't see it immediately, but that's, I think, another main area. Yeah. And I think the other area is just not being aware of your own values and your own compass and ethics and trusting yourself and your voice. Because, like we were saying earlier, it's really hard to navigate in this world. It doesn't always feel safe to be sharing everything, but everything about your reputation and just decisions that you make are going to be based on, you have to have some kind of context of knowing what you're going to say yes and no to. And first of all, work is honorable. And sometimes you just have to agree to do work that maybe is not perfectly in alignment because you have to feed your kids or whatever the thing is. And that is okay. But over time, if you're constantly making decisions where the work you're doing doesn't feel good, or maybe you're working with partners that have questionable values, it always comes back around to bite you. It just does. So that part's really important.
Yeah, all great points. As we wrap up, what are one or two takeaways that you really hope the audience, that they listen? We go to a conference or we go watch or whatever, and there's probably one or two things that we absorb. What are the one or two things that you really hope the audience hears and executes as part of their business?
I think one is just set a planning cadence. So a lot of the categories of things that we talked about, everything from having clarity about your business direction and having alignment or having a handle on your finances, things like that, are based on having a cadence of planning so that you're taking time to step back and look at your business and notice what it is that it needs. What it needs is going to be different at different times. Sometimes you need more storytelling and we need to bring that forward. Sometimes you need to focus on the fundamentals. But making time for planning on your business, working on your business is really critical. I think the other piece is around having the recognition that you are like a human being in your business and you need to really be making decisions that's trusting and honoring your intuition, and also make sure that you have a guide for the way that you are going to be deciding who you're going to work with and what you offer and how you offer it.
Excellent, Pam. Thank you so much. Where can people find you? What do you want them to know about you?
Yeah. So you can find me at pamelaslim.com. LinkedIn is probably the most frequent social channel where I am. So just Pamela Slim over there. And if you want to hop on my newsletter, you can do that as well by jumping on my newsletter. I send a monthly update that I've done for 20 years. I started in 2004, and it's one of my favorite things to do, where I always share an article, but also updates. I feature clients. One of my favorite marketing activities that I do. I can't quite believe I've been in the game so long, but it's true.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate you. And I know our audience does as well.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.